Hello, I'm Edward and I'm a TechX delivery lead here in the Net Zero Technology Centre, and I'll be helping facilitate today's session. Just for some information, the Tech 20 series is our showcase of impressive speakers and technologies that we're supporting accelerate the energy transition. On to today's session, we're here with Luis from eCERTO. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And Luis took part in cohort 2 of our TechX Accelerator program with eCERTO and their co-founders developing their INTEGRATI platform. Before that, Luis spent 15 years in the oil and gas industry, working in Schlumberger's integrated project management, supporting operations in Latin America and the Middle East. And he then completed his MBA at Robert Gordon University and did some consulting at Shell before becoming an entrepreneur. So I'd like to give a round of applause for Luis, today's Tech 20 speaker. And before you get into your presentation, very briefly, would you mind telling the audience a little bit about what you're going to cover in today's talk?
Okay, simple. We're going to talk about how we're transforming capital projects across industries with our technology INTEGRATI. That's literally what we're going to talk about today.
Great. Can you double check your microphone switch is up? I don't know.
Yes, it's on, right?
Great. Excellent. So are we ready? Great. Over to you, Luis. You have 20 minutes. Your time starts now.
Thank you, Edward. So, yes. Today we're going to share with you what we're doing at eCERTO. It has been a very exciting year for us. And what we're doing is boosting capital project performance through digitalization with INTEGRATI. Okay, let's discuss about that. What's the challenge? Capital projects face a trade-off between financial performance and sustainability. 98% of mega projects experience cost overrun of 80%. Okay. This is continue to get proven. Okay, it changed across industries from 40 to 80. Okay, but it's just high. And what we believe is that capital projects deserve a proper definition of the project baseline. This means scope, schedule, and cost. And we're going to achieve this, or we achieve this, through digital integration of process mining and data mining. Those are the two key things related to data science that we're doing with technology. Let's discuss a little bit the status quo, right? Companies use sophisticated software to do engineering analysis, right? Like to calculate the wind patterns, okay, that are going to be around the wind turbines, the wind farm, for example. But when modeling commercial strategies, when modeling cost, when modeling times, usually spreadsheets are used. What's the issue with that? That these models are built with very limited data. It's hard to keep consistency of how to keep them updated. And this usually results in unreliable baseline estimations. What's the issue with that? Well, projects usually, or the leadership of the project needs to increase their contingencies, the management reserves, to try to accommodate for those uncertainties, and that just erodes the financial returns on the project. So it's a big thing. What are the key questions that we usually need to answer in relation to any capital project? They all come down to scope, schedule, cost, and more recently, because we brought it in or up, carbon emissions, right? Most companies are still trying to figure out how to report the carbon emissions at a corporate level of what they did previous year. So they're not even thinking about a capital project. It's a massive undertaking, okay, that actually will also generate a lot of emissions that, depending on the ownership of the project, would hit them in the future. Okay. Then the next questions are all related to these four. What are the project risks? Okay. What are the things that can happen that will delay the schedule, increase the cost, or increase the emissions? And what can we do to deliver it better? Which is, what is the best commercial strategy? What is the best execution strategy to deliver the project? So there are multiple questions, all related to this point. Let's share with you some of the questions that we have received from clients across different levels of organization. So at executive level, we're talking about CEO, CFO, project management officers, right? How do I increase the likelihood of securing project funding? In the end, projects are part of a portfolio, and you are all fighting for funding to take it to the next stage. How do we select, or I select, the project that delivers the highest value? And then how do we increase the confidence on delivering on the financial commitments made to the stakeholders of the project? If we go now to project level, okay, again, projects are competing for resources. So the main struggle is how to raise the visibility of a project within the portfolio, okay, that is fighting with internal and external resources, because there are usually in these projects more than one party involved. How do we ensure that all the assumptions are clear, visible, and understood by all stakeholders? Then how do we reduce the uncertainties of the project so the budget is also reduced? So we can allocate the contingencies in the right way. Finally, when you engage the supply chain, how do you manage the transfer of risk? Okay, how do you manage that commercial risk with the supply chain when most of the expenditure is going to be third-party expenditure? The work will be done, and that 90% of the cost usually goes to a supply chain. Now, from another perspective, the environmental perspective, the sustainability perspective, how do you map the carbon emissions of a project? How do you validate the data you're using, the sources of that data? Okay. And the last question is, how do you estimate the impact financially and in the wider organization of the carbon emissions that a capital project will generate? These are all key questions that all goes down to the project baseline. This is where Integrati kicks in, the technology that we are developing thanks to the Net Zero Technology Center, Opportunity Northeast, all the support that we continue to receive from a Scottish enterprise. Integrati is eCERTO's smart enterprise software as a service platform for capital project modeling. That's what the technology does. Okay? And streamlines the development process by delivering certainty, trust, and value to all the parties involved in the project to enable green financial decisions. The technology has 3 modules: strategy definition, e-commerce, and project execution, to be deployed sequentially across the life cycle of the project. And what we have developed and what we have piloted in 2022 is the strategy definition module. Okay. We pilot the strategy definition module this year in a waste to energy project, and we're going to share with you the output today. And the second pilot project in oil and gas is lined up, okay, in early next year under a contract we have in place. We're looking for the third one in offshore wind. Okay, so let's share with you now how the strategy definition module works, and maybe one of the best things we have learned, that the strategy definition module is helping to exchange opinions by facts. In a project, everybody has an opinion. With Integrati, you will see the facts. The project management team starts to use the technology to kick off a sequential workflow of 5 steps. Steps number 1 starts with defining the scope of the project in the form of a work breakdown structure, right? You divide the project like Lego bricks, all the way from level 0 to level 4. Okay. Then you take each box and allocate a time related to that work package, and that gives you, in step number 2, the schedule in the form of a Gantt chart. Okay. The third step involves the engineering team to create 3 models: cost, risks, and carbon emissions. These are quantitative models, probabilistic models, built with the assumptions of the project team. If the client has data from previous projects, we calibrate those models with previous data. And then in step 5 is where the commercial team gets involved. The procurement team of the owner, the bidding team of the supply chain, to create commercial scenarios. The technology delivers 6 commercial scenarios. The first 3 are the basic ones, delivering the project under transactional commercial models, engaging the supply chain one by one and with individual contracts for individual products and services. Number 2, bundle services, grouping those products and services. Number 3, integrated projects or lump sum turnkey. And then the other 3 are any combination that reduce the project base, that reduce cost, reduce time, and reduce carbon emissions. Those are the 6 scenarios that the technology delivers. Okay? And that's what really drives value to support the project director to make a good proposition of their project to the leadership of the company. That's how the stratification model works. Now let's show you the results of the first pilot project. But before the results, let me share with you the approach. Okay, it's super simple. The first step is we gather the data and quality check the data. That is usually what takes more time, as we were discussing before the presentation. The second step is to upload it in the technology, and finally, simulate and optimize the commercial scenarios. It's 3 simple steps. What we do as well is to sense check that data, okay, according to best practice, right? If the client has standard procedures, well, that's what we use. If not, we just use best practice, right? And the idea is for the models to evolve or to mature according to the project. At the very early stage, we will use the technology to create a work variance structure in step number 1, the project schedule in step number 2, and then the cost, risks, and carbon emission models in step number 3 that will evolve according to the quality of the data, okay, or the maturity of the data, from a class 5 in early visualization all the way to class 1 if you're in a project closeout. Step 5 gives you the commercial strategies, usually as early as the select stage or during the define stage to deliver the project. Okay, so after the pilot project, what were the benefits and outcomes? This is a summary. The technology provided an integrated project view to all the stakeholders by connecting data silos. We create an intuitive work variance structure with interactive work packages, generated an end-to-end integrated project schedule, also created 6 cost breakdown structures, 1 for each potential contracting strategy. We also created the first parametric model for carbon emissions for this company, okay, that allows them to estimate the carbon emissions in the future for themselves or for the new owner of the project. We also gave them the possibility to create a quantitative risk model to properly allocate contingencies and reserves. And we help them to do quality decision making across the portfolio. Well, that's our value proposition for next year. That's the offering. Okay, so that's what we have done in waste to energy. This is what we are about to do in oil and gas with our second client. But in 2023, our focus is to break into offshore wind. We want a client in offshore wind. Okay, so our goal is to demonstrate that the technology is agnostic, that we can support to any capital project. To communicate that, let's think about the asset life cycle of an onshore wind farm. It is a 10-year milestone-driven approach to take the project from it is an idea all the way to construction, 10 years. And that's what you're trying to estimate in advance. Companies need to enter into a farm agreement for lease, a transmission agreement for lease, until they enter into the wind farm lease that allows them to build a wind farm. Now, that's the perspective from the government, or from the current state. This is the perspective from a developer. They need to take the project through those stages to make it happen. And what they need to do is to make decisions. Okay? Each decision will help them to secure fund and to continue to the next stage. And to support those decisions, deliverables are built, okay, at each stage. We usually group these deliverables in 4 groups: integrated project management, technical competence or related to engineering, commercial innovation, which relates to procurement, or financial strength that relates to project finance. Everything that is in bold, and the screen is helping me actually, because everything that is in bold is what INTEGRATI models. Those are quantitative deliverables. INTEGRATI make them coherent, reduce the uncertainty, and support all those decisions across the project life cycle. That's what the technology does. So what's our vision? To transform the sustainability and the financial performance of offshore wind developers by integrating the milestone-driven process of the offshore wind project life cycle with the decision-driven approach of the capital value process of the developers. All these powered by technology, powered by INTEGRATI. The scale of the opportunity is massive, right? Just in Europe, there are 369 gigawatts of infrastructure or projects to be built. That's more or less 33,000 turbines and 675 substations. What's the challenge here? There's going to be more demand than capability in the supply chain to deliver these projects. Okay. So only the developers that engage the supply chain in a strategic way and to develop win-win commercial relationships are the ones who are going to make this project possible within budget and time. So now thinking about pilot projects, we're going to give a few examples. Right? Our niche is very early, like Scott Win, leasing round number 1. Most projects there are, or all projects are the select stage or very early, and we help the companies or the developers to select their concepts with confidence. The next stage would be defined before FID. Okay, like the projects are in the leasing round number 4 of the Crown Estate. We help developers to invest with confidence. So we can come with our technology, make a due diligence on their projects, and sense check that the project is mature enough to take it to FID. Now, that is developing the wind farm itself, right? And the major developments. There is another call from Marine Scotland that is called INTEGRATI, that is related to the electrification of the oil and gas infrastructure with offshore wind farms. Now we're engaging companies interested in these developments to help them visualize the opportunity, because it's even earlier than the select stage. Another complete different type of project, Port of Blyth. We're invited by the Net Zero Technology Center to go to the Port of Blyth and engage the key stakeholders of the project to discuss these topics and to discuss how to support the oil and gas and the wind infrastructure across the North Sea by making the project viable. Okay, so what are the key features of the technology? All we drive is to reduce expenditure by 30% and reduce emissions of the capital projects by modeling the project baseline, scope, schedule, cost, including risk and carbon emissions. The key value proposition or the key differentiator of the technology is the combination of commercial innovation with dynamic pricing. That's what makes things work with the supply chain. We do this through the deployment of data science, cloud computing, and AI. And this will take us to the future to create an architecture that enables self-executing contracts that will reduce disputes between both parties. If you're interested in a demo or a pilot project, please reach out to myself, to Steve that is in the room, or to Shanna that is in Bucharest, just waiting to see what we have to share after this meeting. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Luis. Thank you. So now it's up to you to put Luis on the spot and ask some questions. Does anyone have a question? Pop your hand up, and Sophie and Ronald come along. Yes, over here.
Thanks, Luis. It was a good presentation. Nice to see you in that forum. One of the main questions, we're all living in a world just now that's gone through very difficult situations with global events. How perceptive is the software to realize those events that's coming up, or the actual change that needs to happen through any of these processes, like a pandemic that changes costs, like a war that changes the infrastructures that are in place there? So how perceptive is the software for that, or is there a bit more needed to be done?
I think that more than how perceptive is the software is how well positioned the company is to tackle those challenges and the technology to help to tackle them. Because now it's not only about carbon emissions and global warming. There is a global energy crisis. So the world needs infrastructure projects, right? And that's what the technology helps, right? So as opposed to us creating a technology that's self-aware of those issues, what we help is to address those issues. We need capital projects in the energy sector that has a reduced carbon footprint. That's what the technology does, right? Now, in the data that we use to create the models is where the impact of those future events, okay, that will happen when you execute the project are taken into account. And that's what we model with the risk analysis, right? All working together with the client. In the end, the technology captures data. Okay, so the quality of the model are going to be dependent on the quality of that data of the client. that is what is this relationship between our technology and our advice to those companies to make sure it is used to address the challenges you have raised. But what we have seen positively is that those challenges are the ones that are opening a market for the technology. Make sense?
Thank you. There was a question over here. Yeah, over to yourself. Sophie's just coming.
I'm Willie Reid from the University of Strathclyde. Fantastic presentation, I must say. Very succinct and to the point. However, I'm just looking at the practical sense of this. And I understand your waste to energy process, you know, chemical engineering, you understand the process, you put it together, and I think it's a very good example. I'm trying to understand, as you go up the levels, you know, to these different types of project, you have different dynamics that are happening in this industry, and they're changing all the time. Some say, well, we'll maybe look at this technology, or we'll try this one. This is tried and tested. Where does it go? I'm trying to understand how, are you a team of software engineers only? Are you a team that can have a dynamic relative to chemical engineering, electrical engineering? How does all that fit relative to the market you're going for? And how do you actually engage to make sure that you have that credibility in that market? A difficult question, but I just thought through that process, how does that work?
Great question. And now, I mean, the way to answer is I'm gonna share a little bit, it's gonna imply a little bit of our own story, right? So the first answer is, we're not a team of software developers, and that changed thanks to Rafael that is there. Our very first software developer that we recruited this year, after many years of Steve and I and Manolo and the rest of the team working. Our team and the founders team were project managers, engineers. Okay, Manolo is a process engineer that he got retired from Repsol as a global director of project management and operating model. I'm a driller, okay, that work with a slumber, right? So we're project managers, business developers, and engineers, okay? But that understood deeply the challenge of these capital projects. From the owner's perspective, Manolo, one of the founders that developed the project management methodology for Repsol, now we're doing it for an oil and gas company in Africa. We did it with this company in waste to energy, right? But also from the supply chain. Steve and I come from the supply chain. And it's that interaction that allows us to identify a value proposition that we believe, and we have been with the TechX team driving to market for many years. That from the value proposition, identification of the problem perspective, and creating a solution. Now, thanks to the TechX team, Energy Tech Program of Opportunity Northeast, we are pivoting to become a technology company. Proof is, Rafael is our first developer. With seed investment, now we need to recruit a CTO and build a technology team where we focus on delivering and scaling up the technology. The first step for that was a couple of years ago with the Strathclyde University. We took some students from the business consulting MSc, and we created in Excel the first prototype of the technology. Then we shared that with funding from Scottish Enterprise, with IBM in Copenhagen, and they developed the engine that now runs the technology. Okay. With further funding, now we're replacing that engine with a partnership with Bellrock Technology, a local Scottish company, that with Rafael, that is also a data scientist, okay, we are rebuilding the engine. And that's what we tried in the waste to energy case study. So now we have a prototype that is functional, not yet ready to be deployed and scale up, because that requires seed investment. That is why the third pilot project is so important, to prove that there is a technology that does what it claims to do. Okay, but now we need to take that step. We need to become a technology company by recruiting a technology team that is able to deploy this technology at scale. And that's what we're here for. Does that answer your question? Thank you very much. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. And last comment on that one, right? And this is the irony. We designed the technology first for well construction projects from the perspective of the supply chain. And then we realized that there were no tenders in the world asking for that. through the TechX program, we pivoted for the first time and created a technology for the owner as opposed to the supply chain first. Now it's a technology for both. Then COVID hit, oil price crash, and we realized that a well solution was not just enough. So we redesigned the technology and made it agnostic. Then we engaged oil and gas companies, and our first pilot project is not in oil and gas because everybody's in the race to be second. So we engaged other industries first, and we found our first pilot project in waste to energy. Now with that, we found it in oil and gas. And thanks to that, now big companies like Equinor now are inviting us to participate in their accelerator program in Norway to see if they're going to use it. But the challenge is, of at least in our industry, the race to be second. That's the most difficult thing.
Thanks. Another question? Rona, we got one at the back here.
Morning, Roberto Stava from Baker Hughes. So, good presentation, thank you. It seems to me like your pilot project was on a company that's not maybe as mature in project management, but other companies like they want to work for they're big, have established processes, established tools they pay a lot of money for. Is that a target market for you? And if it is, how do you enter into those companies? How does Integrati work in those companies?
So the first answer of the question is connected to the previous one. We needed to engage smaller companies that were not shy to admit they needed help, okay, and they welcome us for help. And they receive our very small, without a large reputation as a company team, as trusted advisors, right? And we deliver the value we share with you, okay? Now we're using these pilot projects to engage large companies like yours and yours, okay, to show that this is a shared problem, okay, as we discussed there in the data, right? It happens across industries, and the larger companies, the challenge they have is how do they share the capital projects knowledge of their portfolio in the UK with the United States, for example, okay? Because companies make the same mistake. Companies are not yet fully integrated, and that is why digitalization is driving that, okay? So what we're doing to engage larger companies is to try to enter into their innovation ecosystems, like the example we just gave about Techstars with Equinor, right? We approach their innovation ecosystem for them to realize that this is an early stage company with a very high value technology that all they need to do is to trial it, okay? So we approach the owners, their innovation departments, and the innovation departments of the supply chain as well. Companies, technology companies like Baker, SLB, that they have the reputation providing this type of solutions to deliver services to the big clients, okay? So it is a network effort until we make it, and we're making it. So we just need to keep trying.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, one down the front.
Hiya, Bini Sharma, CCU International. Thank you for the presentation. That was great. I've got a question around the mapping of carbon emissions. Obviously, it's not a very straightforward thing. Things are changing constantly. There's a lot of emissions that we just don't know what those emissions are for particularly certain projects, things that are out of our own scope, our own control. I just wanted to kind of understand, how do you map those emissions? What you mentioned assumptions, where do those assumptions come from, and what sort of metrics do you use to do that?
That's a good question. And when we identified the opportunity in 2020 that carbon emissions were missing in a project baseline, we saw it as an opportunity we need to introduce this feature into the technology, and got funding from a Scottish enterprise to put it in. And then we found the pilot project, and was the first a real opportunity for us to answer those questions. The good thing is that companies, our client is a public company, so they need to report their emissions, okay? So they had a project to report the emissions of 2021, and they were receiving advice from a global management consultancy firm on that, okay? So we worked with that company to see which standards and what assumptions they were making to report. And we applied the same assumptions to estimate, okay? So the main limitation we have found is that in capital projects, everybody's using, not in capital projects actually, across many industries, cost is still being used as a proxy to estimate emissions, okay? And multiplied by conversion factors. So in our view, emissions are being overestimated okay, or overinflated, because depending on your capex, there are, according to each activity, coefficients that you can use to estimate the corresponding emissions that are approved by the UK government for reporting purposes, right? So what is the development opportunity that we have detected? We created a parametric model, and that is why the word parametric was important, with those estimations, okay, using the data of our clients, right? Using cost as a proxy. But what we need to do, what is the next step, is to create a bottom-up emissions approach. In the same way, when an owner requests a price for a service, that price needs to come with the price per unit and scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 carbon emissions per unit of consumption. It needs to be driven by the owner, right? So if before you emit, when you are requesting a service, you request the emissions data, you can estimate in the future and you will be ready to report after the fact, right? But that is a development opportunity. There is no data right now to do that type of emission. But being a technology company, what we're gonna do next year, we're gonna incorporate the next feature to include in the resource catalog, next to prices, emissions in the 3 scopes. So when the data is available, the technology can calculate it. That's where we are with that. Make sense? Steve?
Thanks. Question from Steve at the back.
Great presentation, Lewis. Well done, it was great. Just a quick question. Can you elaborate a little bit how a tier 1 service company can behave like the buyer in the relationship? Just touch on that. So how a tier 1 service company, an EPC or whatever, could use Integrati as the buyer, as opposed to being the supplier. And then just as you close out, I know we're talking about offshore wind pilot projects and we are all in the energy sector, but there's still oil under my fingernails. And I'm pretty keen. Can you make a clear ask to not only the broader energy market, but the oil and gas people that might be rattling around about, what we'd like from them as a company, their next step, how we'd like to engage them immediately, and then maybe touch on the our activities in the next couple of months.
So first question, when you think about a capital project, it's a big undertaking with massive work packages, right? Okay. So a tier 1 contractor within its own package behave as a developer, okay? Not a developer of the asset, but it's the one that's going to deliver a massive work package. So in a well construction situation or in an E&P project, right? Wells is 60-70% of the capex, right? Okay. So a wells management company or a tier 1 contractor in wells is a good client for Integrati, okay? In an offshore wind farm, okay, you need to think also about the suppliers, right? The suppliers of the turbines or the EPCM companies, right? They behave as tier 1 contractors and they manage the project on behalf of the developer, okay? So even though the technology is now pitched to the owners, okay, tier 1 contractors can also use them because in your own scope, you are the owner. And that's the answer to that question, right? Then the next question that is, besides offshore wind, what we're looking is pilot projects in the energy sector, right? Yesterday, we were having a conversation about geothermal applications, right? That are very close to the oil and gas industry, for example, but it's developing now by itself. And like waste to energy, the main challenge they have is to take this project forward without subsidies. Okay, so unless they find ways to reduce cost, okay, taking a look at the commercials to deliver that capex, many renewable projects will just not be feasible. That's where we can help. And with that in mind, we're developing 2 case studies, one in onshore wind and another one in solar. Okay, so we can demo to any company, look, these are different type of capital projects, okay, that can be demoed, okay. Not only the massive one, but the ones that maybe are at a smaller scale that you can take a portfolio of the assets, right? So those are the type of projects that we're looking for. And in terms of activity for next year, we are now in the process to apply for grants, okay, for helping any company interested in a pilot project to cover the development cost on our side, okay, so that reduce the cost of a pilot project. So for that, what we need is show of interest. So we can submit our applications in January to 2 competitions, Innovate UK and the offshore wind growth partnership that is sponsored by Equinor, Ocean Winds, and Iberdrola or Scottish Power, right? So those are the type of things we're looking for. Pilot projects, okay? And, well, I need to say, taking the forum, any individuals were fundraising, right? So anyone who would like to join eCERTO as a shareholder, let's have a chat as well.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our section. Round of applause for Luis. Thank you so much. So please do feel free to get in touch with the team. I'm sure a few of them will be happy to chat later on today. That is our last Tech 20 of this year. So please, if you're interested, keep an eye on the events page of the Net Zero Technology Centre for future Tech 20s and other events coming up later on next year. Unfortunately, we do have an event in here at 10 o'clock, but if you do want to network, we invite you to grab a coffee up in the reception area, up at the front of the building. The toilets are just on the right on your way out. Grab some snacks and things like that. And thank you for taking the time to come along to today's Tech 20. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you again very soon. Thank you.